I now have the honor of introducing our keynote speakers. I'm so thrilled tonight to have Imani Rupert-Gordon and Chase Strangio joining us in conversation. Imani is Executive Director at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, a feminist LGBTQ legal organization known for tackling issues of race, gender, and economic inequality facing LGBTQ people. She has had a long career leading organizations serving the needs of Black LGBTQ people, unhoused LGBTQ people, and LGBTQ elders, and is now leading NCLR's amazing projects supporting immigration protections, lifting up racial justice, and ending conversion therapy. Chase is Deputy Director for Transgender Justice with the ACLU's LGBT and HIV project, was recently named to the Time 100 list, and has led litigation for transgender and LGBTQ civil rights across the country, including representing Gavin Grimm, a trans man who has been fighting to overturn his school's anti-trans bathroom policy for more than 5 years, and the late Amy Stevens, whose powerful story of employment discrimination was part of the landmark Bostock decision this summer, which definitively won workplace protections for LGBTQ people nationwide. I want to say a few words about why I invited these incredible folks to share with us tonight. I think we all agree that we're at a defining moment right now. We are suffering every day incalculable losses of life in our Black, brown, and trans communities. We are witnessing unbearable injustices in our police departments, our prisons, our federal government, and our courts, as our legal system processes the pandemics of racism, COVID-19, and white supremacist violence. All of this feels overwhelming. And on the days where I feel overwhelmed, I turn to our communities. I feel the brilliance of our communities in my bones. Our stories are deep and powerful and full of love. In QLaw's legal clinics, we hear amazing human experiences. This year, it has been experiences of things like evictions, of lost jobs, of terrifying healthcare discrimination, of brutal interactions with police and immigration detention. But they are also stories of resilience. They're stories of support networks. They're stories of advocating to win against an unfair landlord. They're stories of filing discrimination complaints that make a record of a terrible experience in a hospital. And they're stories of communities protecting each other, communities coming together and protecting community. Chase and Imani are leaders who I see leading with love and building movements in our communities. They do defensive work in our courts, and both the ACLU and NCLR have won life-saving victories. But the courts are not where we build the world we want to live in. We build that world in connection and interconnectedness with each other, by being in conversation, by being inspired by our connections. And that is work that Chase and Imani lead us to as well, by doing legal work that honors our community. And with that, I welcome you to our keynote conversation. Thank you, Chase Strangio and Imani Rupert-Gordon.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. And I'm so happy to be here. And one of the things that's so hard about this time is that we're not able to connect in some of the ways that we're used to. But what feels really special for me right now is that I've never been in conversation with Imani, and I don't think we've ever met. So it's so nice to also see you and meet you and start this conversation. So I guess starting with a somewhat loaded question for 2020, how are you?
Thank you so much. I do want to echo what you said, Chase. That's really kind. We haven't met, but I have obviously read and heard wonderful things about you. So I'm excited to be in conversation. And Denise, thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. So how am I doing? You know, wow, isn't that different from day to day?
Yeah.
You know, it's I feel like it's certainly changing very often day to day, but certainly from week to week. We're in a tough spot. You know, I think a lot of times what we're going to say is we're at a crossroads, but I sincerely believe that we are, and we are. There's a way that we're watching the foundation of our democracy. We're watching it really, I'll say shake under us, you know? And so I think that's something that's really scary. And then, but also, you know, in some of the ways that are scary and unfortunate, the way that we see folks in the street right now, I also think that there's a lot of hope there too. So there's parts that are just, I mean, so much of this is scary, but a lot of what we're seeing is really hopeful. And I'm, you know, an interesting time to be here doing this work. So I'm saying that I am doing okay. I'm doing okay. But what about you? How are you doing?
I mean, yeah, every day does feel like a year in so many ways. It's like, it feels like the time of a year, and then it feels long. It also feels like I go through as many emotions as I might over the course of a year. And so I was just thinking, like, today, it's October 8th. I woke up sort of recalling October 8th, 2019, which was the day that we were in the Supreme Court arguing Amy's and Gerald Bostock's and Don Zarda's cases. And sort of that was this, I was like, on the one hand, it feels like yesterday. On the other hand, it feels so long ago. And that gave me this sense of like deep inspiration about what we can accomplish as a movement. And I was remembering that feeling of walking outside the courtroom, and Amy was still alive then. And it, as she was getting sicker, one of the things that she recalled was that the people chanting outside the court, "We love you, Amy," was one of the single most meaningful experiences of her life. And that just, I was remembering that, and that just reminded me that, like, we are going to fight and build this together, because I didn't think we were going to win that case. And it's incredible that we did, but I felt so much hope, even just in the ways that we came together. And then, so I was carrying that today. And then I found out this evening that Monica Roberts passed away. And, she's just this incredible leader, this Black trans woman who's been holding the history of the trans community for some periods of time on her own. And that just felt like, I was like, how could we lose another person? And so it's like every day we're like holding so much pain and grief and so much hope and energy. And those extremes feel almost exhausting, but also, I'm ready to galvanize through both of them. The pain motivates me even as I feel sort of gutted, and the hope and the experience of togetherness also motivates me. And so I'm trying to, as I close out each day / year, like hold on to that. But it is like, I feel so lucky to be doing this work in this moment, as scary as it is. I mean, like, how are you feeling? You're leading this critically important organization. How are you feeling, like, moving into a big election, and then 2021 with so many unknowns? Like, where do you think the future of our movement is taking us, or where are we going to take it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's, I mean, you've said so much, and so much that I also just want to comment on too. I also want to acknowledge Monica Roberts. I really appreciate your bringing her into the room. When we think about what she's done, certainly for Black trans women, but for Black women everywhere. I mean, when we think about her blog that started, I think it started in like 2000. I mean, it really was the first one. And just, I mean, her sisterhood, I, last year before I worked at NCLR, I worked for an organization serving Black LGBTQ women. And we had this program, and I invited Black LGBTQ women to talk about how they get into their positions of power and how to make change. And Monica was one of the panelists that we had. I mean, the amount of, the way that she lifts like Black women up, like we lost someone great.
Yeah, I want to hold that too. Like this is like such a huge loss for so many people, and it's like it's a titan. And her blog, I also just want to say too, like, there was I didn't even know about blogs, and she had this blog, and she was chronicling Black trans existence in this way at a time when no one was listening, and she was like, I'm going to make you listen. And that's just, I just feel so sad.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's not exaggeration when we say that no one would. I mean, she was the only one doing it, that's not an exaggeration. And so, so thank you for bringing her in the room. So what do I think about the movement? Honestly, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. And I think what a lot of us are thinking about is that we don't know what this is going to look like. And I think that's sort of the theme of 2020, is that we don't know what's coming next. And it's hard to prepare for things that it's hard to prepare like that, because I feel like we're seeing things for the first time. And we're also watching people learn from the first time too. So often we talk about how important it is to be inclusive and to be intersectional. And many people, for the first time ever, we think that like folks are talking about an LGBTQ identity and racial justice and what those look like together. Thinking about, healthcare in a way that is talking about everyone. Very often we come from a very individualistic place where, we're looking at healthcare not so much for everyone, but how it's accessible to some people. And I think living through a pandemic right now, folks are remembering for the first time that it doesn't much matter if you have amazing healthcare if your neighbor doesn't. And I think this is going to fundamentally change the way that we think about things, that it really does matter that we are intersectional, that we're inclusive, and that we're protecting all of us. And we're at a place where we're talking about existential things now. When we're talking about healthcare, when we're talking about climate change, these are things that that we have to deal with these things. Like this isn't just something, if we don't deal with something else, nothing else will matter. And so thinking about this, thinking about police violence, these are things that we have to think about. These are fundamental and existential things that we are considering. And so I am hopeful that because so many folks have had to think about think in a way that is inclusive and a bit more intersectional than I think that not everyone has thought about in the past. I think we're going to see some really amazing things come. Now, those amazing things I think are often going to come from folks in the streets, and I think that is something that's really important. That oftentimes our movement is led by people being in the streets, and so looking at our activists pushing us to do the right things, and then also in places and organizations like ours being able to be the other things, because also when folks are in the streets because we're looking for structural change. And so there's a role for all of us here to do something different. And I think that that's something that's really exciting. I feel like we should you're in the room with us right now, and I'm sure everyone here is thinking about the Bostock decision and what this means for us. And so you talked a little bit about what this meant for you a year ago. What does it mean now when we think about what does this mean? I think it was a shock to virtually everyone when one here like that. And beautiful and amazing. And
yes, love that kind of shock. Yeah.
I remember when. I'm getting thinking about it, but yeah. What do you think that means? What is that going to mean for us in the future? And also, if you could talk about how this is going to touch other things beyond employment, I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, no, I think that it, having like poured my heart and soul and watched Amy sort of live this trauma over and over, getting that decision and having it be so unequivocal was just, it was incredible, especially after the year of what the year had held up to that point. It was just, having the court come down 6-3 and say, unequivocally Title VII prohibits discrimination. It's per se discrimination for all LGBTQ people. I mean, that was huge. And I think there's lots of things about it that we can really hold on to. It was 6-3, which is in a world of a 5-4 court and now a 4-4 court or a 5-3 court, having that security feels really good. Having it be, an interpretation of a statute that, as you mentioned, like, it's definitely going to apply outside the employment context. Like, courts have been very clear for a long time that when you're talking about Title VII's prohibition on sex discrimination, they look to case law on Title VII when interpreting Title IX. So I don't see any reason why a principal court is not going to apply the reasoning of Bostock to education, to healthcare, to credit, to housing and shelter. That said, what do we have principled courts? What is the future of the courts? And so I think that this decision is incredibly important. It gives us a ton of momentum. It at least holds the line on the sort of status of the case law and doesn't chip away at civil rights protections, across the board, which was, something I was hugely worried about when this case went up to the court. Are they just going to start chipping away generally? I do think we have to start, being worried, and we have been worried for a long time about, well, what's coming on the back end? What are the religious exemptions? What's going to happen to trans folks in sports and in school bathrooms? And I think we have a lot of fighting to do. And I think as incredible as it was, the win was a product of generations of work in the streets. It was a product of, the people going back to Pauli Murray leading art legal thinking, Sylvia and Marcia leading us in the streets, Monica Roberts making sure that, the stories of Black trans women are told. And so it's a reminder that as we leverage Bostock moving forward, particularly at a time with an incredibly conservative takeover of the federal judiciary, we have to go, like you were saying, Imani, to the street-based mobilization. Because at the end of the day, the law doesn't really appreciate nuance. The law doesn't really understand problems outside of the individual particularly well. And if you look at sort of the systemic roots of so much violence and discrimination in our country, they really demand systemic and transformative solutions that may not be able to be held in the courts. So that's a lot to say, but I think we have so much to do, and we can still hold the incredible feeling of all that Bostock brings to us.
I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think that's really important for folks to hear, that this is giving us an amazing, this is amazing support that we can use to protect LGBTQ folks, and that it's not all legal solutions that we're looking for, that it's going to be imperative that we are working in coalition, that our thought partners, that we're doing work, that not everything has to have a legal solution. Because the thing is, and I think you were saying this, which I just love too. I mean, the fact that we could have a decision like this with a makeup of the court like we had at that time, that's a result of public education, of community education, of changing the way that we think about people, and the way that we think about humanity, the way that we think about justice. That's the work of everyone doing this work, that we could have a decision by a justice this is something incredible. And so just thinking about when we're moving forward to making sure that we are using everything that we can, every tool that we have, everything in our toolbox to get to equality, because we need that.
Yeah, no, totally. And I as shocked as I was on June 15th, when the court issued its decision, I woke up that morning feeling the most hopeful I had ever felt. And it wasn't before I ever saw that decision, because the day before, on June 14th, 15,000 people rallied for Black trans lives in Brooklyn. And it was so beautiful. And I just think back to when I, was first going to Trans Day of Action rallies in New York, 10 years ago. They were beautiful and amazing, but we had like 50 people there, 100 people there. To think about 15,000 people showing up in a pandemic to say, we are going to center Black trans life. And so I was like, we are already moving so far forward before we ever got Justice Gorsuch's opinion. And then Justice Gorsuch's opinion could never have happened without the mobilizing that led 15,000 people to Brooklyn. And I know there were rallies in San Francisco and LA. And so that is the work, and we, as a lawyer, I want to support that, and that's what's demanded of us. So yeah, so I guess maybe to close out, what's something that, I don't know, are you feeling hopeful about, or what do you wake up in the morning and think, this is going to guide me through the day?
Oh goodness, I started in my position just about 6 months ago, and so I actually haven't met anyone from my team in real life. All of our work has been done entirely remotely. But I love getting up in the morning and having check-ins with folks. What I'm reminded of is how important this work is during a time like this. Our work has never been more important, and so getting up and walking to my living room and my work area, that has been just it's been really calm for me. It's provided me a lot of security, because I know that we're able to be part of doing something really good, and I'm just happy to be on the team. What about you, though?
Yeah, I think similarly, as exhausted as I am by so many things, as much as I'm resistant to get on Zoom some days, it is the conversations with my comrades that keeps me going. And sometimes it's just getting on and laughing, the things I used to do in the office, making jokes or whatever it is that we need to sort of feel human. But that sense of we're gonna, when sort of push comes to shove, there are people who are around me who are going to say, all right, well, how are we going to throw down for this right now? And that, that makes me feel hopeful. And it's whether it's like coworkers at the ACLU or people I've been organizing with for a long time, or this conversation right now, I'm just like, all right, we got this. As awful as things feel, I feel hopeful too.
Wonderful. Chase, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
It was so nice to chat with you too, Imani. Thank you.